We caught up with Phil at the annual Aspen Ideas Festival, high in Colorado's Rocky Mountains, where he's presenting a talk on technology in sports.
I grew up in a city, a western suburb city of Sydney, Australia. It was Parramatta, and just about a mile or two away from my home was a boys' club. And one of my friends said, "Hey, let's go play at the boys' club," because they had all kinds of different sports. You know, they had fencing, boxing, wrestling, gymnastics, and I took a liking to flipping and twisting and tumbling and jumping on the trampoline. So I started doing that, and as serendipity would have it, there just happened to be a two-time Olympian coach there, and he had his own special group, and he would go and look at the kids that just came in and say, "All right, you, come on over to my advanced group," and I got picked for the advanced group.
What's the feeling like as a young kid being that kid picked? I mean, because there's a number of kids doing it, right?
Yeah, again, though, I was so naive. I was like, oh, okay, sure. I mean, it wasn't anything. Again, I didn't relate to the fact that how big it was that he was a two-time Olympian. I was 8 years old.
Right.
So, and everybody just started, as I started getting better and better, I had an affinity for gymnastics. I was pretty fast twitch fiber, so I could jump and I could spin and I could twist pretty good. And the parents and the employees started saying, "He's just going to be like Benny. He's going to go to the Olympics." You know, I started winning state championships, then I won national championships, and then they said, and they said it, so I believed it. I was like, okay. And so there was never a doubt in my mind that I was going to go to the Olympics.
And that's a big part of it, isn't it? I mean, it's the desire and the determination and the knowledge.
Yep. It's the desire and it's the opportunity to have the facility, to have the people around you. Because because of Benny, my coach, we were the best team we were a little club team, but we were the best team in the country. We could have fielded a state team and still beat the others because we had great coaching. It's got to be great coaching. You've got to have a mentor, you've got to have the opportunity, and you've got to have the desire. And I had the desire because it was fun. That's the other piece. If it's a grind, you're not going to do it. But gymnastics, there's so many different pieces of equipment, so many different skills that you can do that you can never get dull. It's never boring, it's never dull.
Phil is now the Director of Sports Technology and Innovation at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. He was a three-time gymnastics all-around champion in Australia and competed in the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. That year, Australia won 5 medals, but none were awarded to Phil.
Being an Australian, I had gotten to the Olympics. I wasn't going to win any medals. I knew that.
But you knew that?
I knew that going in. I was just going to do the best.
That must have been tough, though. I mean, as a guy who's winning all the time, to go in saying, I'm just not going to...
Yeah, but I'd competed internationally multiple times. I'd been to 2 world championships before that. I'd been to World Cups. So I knew the international... I knew the guys. I knew the guys I was going to compete against. So I knew exactly what it was like. For sure.
So you go into the competition knowing you're not going to win, but you're going to compete at the highest level.
Do my best, yeah.
And so what was it like? Does that kind of take some of the pressure off in a sense that you know that you're not going to? You go, you do your best, and then you can also be an observer in a sense, or?
That's a good way of putting it. It was different because most of your international competitions are at floor level. But at the Olympic Games, they set everything up on podiums. So you would have to climb up the stairs, stand on the podium, and then you're exposed. I mean, there's thousands of people standing around watching you. But once you get into your mental imagery that you normally do in a competition, it all goes away. And it's only you and the parallel bars, or you and the high bar. So yeah, you just learn to focus, and it's just, you've been doing those routines over and over and over for years and years and years. So it's just automatic. You switch off and you go into auto mode. So this point that's 3 feet from the swinging point would move through an arc that has 9 feet in length.
Phil's love for gymnastics would evolve into him becoming an innovator in sports technology. He has a PhD in exercise science biomechanics from Arizona State University, one of the largest public universities in the United States.
And then the transition. Talk to us, because you almost in some respects you almost have 2 lives, don't you? I mean, that you shut the page on that chapter of your life and move into a new chapter.
I think I was very, very fortunate. I never really shut the gymnastics page. When I was doing my training for the 1980 Moscow Olympics at Arizona State, because I came back to Arizona State after I qualified at the World Championships, and I trained with Lindsay for a while at ASU, the coach, Don Robinson, said, hey, why don't you become my assistant coach, and you can do a master's degree in biomechanics. And I suddenly realized that biomechanics was engineering of the human body for sports. And so I just fell right into doing biomechanics, and my thesis was on the handspring front somersault vault in gymnastics. And so I kind of transitioned from training gymnastics into working in sports and gymnastics. And one of our professors, a sports psychologist, Dr. Dan Landers, was on the, again, serendipity, he was on the advisory board for the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. So he took us to on a field trip to check out the sports science program and to look at the training center. And I got to meet the director, Dr. Charles Dillman, and he heard about my background. And in the next month or two, a research engineer position came available and got it.
Do you think your love of the sport gave you the love of what you're doing? I mean, was it a natural transition, I guess, is the question, that to go into this, there would be a certain fascination having competed as much as you had?
Well,
right?
see, that was the beauty of it. Because I'd been there, done that, and now I was taking the science of it and the physics of it, I could relate on a visceral level as well as on a scientific level. I could say, well, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't make sense if I looked at the scientific aspects of it. And I think that's what made me unique, because I was an elite athlete in several different sports, gymnastics, diving. I was pretty decent at track and field and trampolining. So anything that was explosive type of sport, I kind of had a feeling for. And so I could apply the physics to it, the engineering to it. And it just so happened back in this was 82. The IBM PC was just coming out, the Apple II was just coming out. So it was getting to the stage where you could start programming computers to do some cool things with sports. And I remember back in 1982-83, we created a real-time motion capture system where we put LED markers on your body and into an Apple II. I don't know if you're the little old computer
sure,
with,
yeah.
I think it had 64K of memory. We were able to do a real-time stick figure on the screen and calculate the angles. And that sort of thing really got me excited, because I could see the direct practical application to coaching. If I can tell you what you're doing, if I can tell you how far you're leaning forward, how much you're bending your knee, how high you're jumping, what your velocity is, it's really good feedback in you taking that in and making modifications. The coach coming up with exercises and drills. And so I never really left the sport. I just transitioned into coach scientist role.
Let me pose this question to you, though. I'm thinking of you as this 8-year-old and somebody at some point saying, you're going to go to the Olympics. That's something you can see. There's somebody in the 80s saying, boy, the internet and computers, because back then, like you're describing a computer back then, a lot of people didn't see the future that we are in now.
I didn't see the internet. What I did see was the ability to start capturing data into a computer, capturing visual images. Up until then, we were using film. And what that meant is if you had a training camp come into the training center, you'd have to film them with 16 millimeter film, send it away to get developed, bring it back. By the time you got any data to them, it was the last day of the camp. So Dillman said to me, hey, now we've got an IBM PC. Is there any technology out there that can shorten this time cycle? So there were image capture cards, so I could bring it into the computer directly from video, from VHS tape, and do the digitizing overnight and get it back to them the next day. So I didn't know the internet was coming, but I did know there was new technology coming that would enable me to do what I needed to do.
Phil had a vision, but he couldn't have fulfilled it without the right technology. The advent of the personal computer and its ability to capture data and images allowed his vision to become a reality.
So talk to me about your more recent tenure with the U.S. Olympic Committee. What are some of the things that are going on that are exciting?
Well, I've been there now since 2010 at the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista. And primarily, I think I mentioned before, I've been working with track and field. And my position was basically to find any new technology and apply it to help them improve performance and avoid injury. And so video is one of the staples of our technology, and video is really advancing rapidly. I like to call it intelligent video now, because it's not just the same old stuff as it was before. And now we've got cameras that we can do 5 or 6 cameras or 3 or 4 cameras from multiple different directions. They're automatically synchronized. They automatically send it to an iPad, and so the coaches get to review that on the spot. And the athletes really enjoy that because they can post it to their social media.
Oh, of course.
Phil also developed one of the first sports motion analysis systems specifically to measure the biomechanics of a golfer swing. It's now become standard in 3D golf swing analysis.
I played golf a little bit in high school, but not very much. However, because we developed, my company, I guess the backstory to that is after the Olympic Committee, we decided to take that technology and create a company and start doing motion analysis of sports in general. And of course, golf caught our eye because that's where supposedly the money was.
You say supposedly, it's not?
Not really, and that's another story. But anyway, we got to the point, we started off with the standard video motion analysis where you put the ping pong balls on and the reflective markers fluoresce and the computer catches the motion. And we did develop a basic golf system that way, but it was still problematic because the two cameras have to see the ball in order to track where it is in 3D space. So if it gets hidden, if he turns around, it goes away, you lose that data. And so you have to post-process. So it wouldn't be what we call real time. It would take 15, 20 minutes to just get one capture. Much faster than I was doing before where it took overnight, but still not fast enough for me. So we found some new technology that was electromagnetic based, which was true real time, high speed, 240 frames per second, true three-dimensional real motion. So I could put these sensors now on a golfer, and I could watch them on the screen. As they were moving, you could see them moving on the screen. We superimposed it on top of an avatar with the golf club and the whole thing. And so not only could they look at it as if it was a 3D video, but now we could capture all the data. We captured what was called the kinematic sequence.
So explain that.
Which tells us, the kinematic sequence is the sequence that gives you the efficiency of their motion. How are they transferring energy? The only connection of a golfer to the ground is through their feet. So how do they move their legs, and how do they put forces into the ground? How do they move their legs, their hips, their shoulders, their arms, so that it all comes out right in the end, which is the face of the golf club? So what happens is the pelvis or the hips rotate. They accelerate and then they decelerate, and that deceleration transfers energy up to the shoulders, and they accelerate and decelerate. And then the arms do the same thing. So I didn't even have to see a golfer's swing. I could see that one graph and I could tell you that's a Tour Pro golfer. And you could see the efficiency and the beauty of the motion. So we use that to help them define their exercises, their drills. Working with the Titleist Performance Institute and Dr. Greg Rose and Dave Phillips, they came up with specific ways to take this 3D motion information and design strength and conditioning program, flexibility program, and of course on the driving range, the drills and exercises too. And I supplied them with all the data. So I never have been a great golfer. I'm just a good golf scientist.
But that's important, right? I mean, people need that. So what's it like when you know you've it's one thing to compete and you know that you've competed well, but to come up with a technology where you know this is big. What was that moment like?
That's very exciting, and not to brag, but it is still one of the best golf swing analysis systems in the world, and we developed it in 1995. So it's been around. Of course, it's evolved. In 1995, it was only 30 frames a second, and it wasn't very accurate. Now it's 240 frames, but to be able to create a system that's still used by the top golfers in the world is very exciting. In fact, I got an email yesterday saying, Dr. Phil, can you come and do a three-dimensional analysis for one of my tour players? So I still get some consulting calls to do that because they like to see what the kinematic sequence. And one of the other very special things that we can do with the AMM 3D, TPI 3D, it's kind of co-branded, is we can look at what the wrists are doing in the golf swing. And of course, that's extremely important because your hands are the connection to the club, and how you move your wrists in the downswing is way more complicated than we first thought. You know, firstly you flex, then you extend, then you ulnar deviate, then you supinate, all in 0.2 of a second, maybe 1/4 of a second. And that's a new sequence. That's like a kinematic sequence, but for just the hands and wrists. And that's what the tour pros really want to look at. They want to know, how am I affecting that club?
And it makes a huge difference, doesn't it? I mean, the difference between these golfers is like this, though. I mean, that can make a huge difference, right?
And that's the same in any elite sport. It's basically an asymptotic curve. As you start to get to the elite, the curve starts to come over. And what that means is it's so much more difficult to get that millisecond or that extra yard or that extra centimeter or whatever it is. It becomes extremely difficult. And so being able to accurately measure, and that's one of my bugbears as far as technology is concerned. And I get on the soapbox about this quite often. In this day and age, you've got a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon with inertial technology, inertial sensors, all kinds of new sensors. And they want to make a system and get it out the door quickly so they can make sales. And sometimes accuracy gets left behind. But what I've heard quite often is they'll say, well, it's just for coaching. It doesn't really have to be that accurate, does it? And I'm like, it absolutely has to be just as accurate as if you were doing research. Because if you were telling a golfer that their club face was closed by 1 degree, but your system was wrong and it was really open by 1 degree, what's that going to do to the ball? It's going to really change it significantly. So the technology has to be very, very accurate. And that's one of the things I'm passionate about.
Phil is also using his expertise to help Olympic-level shot putters improve their throw.
Oh, that's big. Yes.
The other technology that we've been working on is what we call radar technology. I work a lot with the throws. Specifically, I'm the sports scientist for shot put. That's by default. I've become the sports scientist there, the biomechanist. And so we have this radar technology that allows us to measure the trajectory of the shot put on release, the velocity, the direction. Basically, it's a cannonball flying, and so it follows all the laws of physics, and we can track it, and we can tell the athlete exactly what velocity was, what direction was, and we now know that the most important thing in a shot put is how fast it's going when it leaves your hand.
Really interesting.
If you change the speed of the shot put by 1/10 of a meter per second, it's going to go almost a foot, 25 centimeters further. So it's a big deal.
Wow.
So speed is a big deal. And so that's one of the things we're working on. Of course, it's important to have the appropriate launch angle as well.
Sure.
But it's really speed. And so in Rio, we got gold and silver in the shot put. And I'm not saying that the technology was the reason, but I think it helped. But one of the things that is difficult is, what do you do with the data when you've got it?
Phil's talk at the Aspen Ideas Festival was entitled AI and the Quest for Olympic Gold.
So for your audience here, what do you think they want to hear, and what do you hope they'll take away?
Well, it's two different topics. One is technology and the other one is AI. What I always try to do is I try to relate it back to the practicality. What can they take away? What can they understand? If they're going to go back to their sport, what's important for them, and how is technology going to help them? I mean, we can see that in the consumer world, there's technology now with Fitbits and the Apple Watch and all of that sort of technology, that they can start applying some of this stuff to their own training and try and get some of that across. To talk about AI is a little esoteric, but as long as they can understand what the benefits are, not what the technology necessarily is, what's it do for me? Well, AI is going to help me understand what I'm doing wrong or right. It's going to help me track my stuff automatically without having to push too many buttons. The nice thing about AI is it's going to simplify the way we make these measurements and how we do this tracking.
With the ability to measure nearly everything about an athlete's performance, technology has revolutionized the very nature of sports training, bringing a closer connection between athletes and sports scientists.
is that the biggest thing you see is just the skills are improved, the injuries are lessened, sports technology, the impact it's having on a daily basis? What would you say?
I think it's not just technology, it's the scientific method. And the scientific method needs technology, it needs analytics. So basically what you're doing is you're measuring. I like to think of it as a data continuum. You start with the measurement on one side, and then you store that data up in the cloud, and then you analyze that data, and then you bring it back down to the coach and the athlete, and you feed it back to them in a manner that they can understand and implement. And so that's how that whole continuum can make such a difference, because if you don't measure, you don't really know what's going on. You could say in shot put, for example, that throw looked a little high, or that throw looked a little flat. But how flat? How high? And if we can measure that, we can track it. And like I said, with my logbook now, what I did as a gymnast myself in a exercise book, now you can do on your phone, and you can store that in the cloud, and you can do analytics on that so that you get the indicators. Am I fatiguing? Am I likely to get an injury? What was my best mark? Was that the best skill I've ever done? All of these things, if you combine that with a knowledgeable coach who knows how to apply that material, then you've got a winning combination. And that's what we're aiming at.
Technology can also prevent injuries. Sensors in this mouth guard send an alert when the player has suffered a serious but invisible injury during a game. When a devastating blow occurs, an LED light turns red, while a medium-degree impact hit lights up blue. The displays are bright enough for coaches to see from the sidelines.
So what drives you? I mean, what excites you about this technology? Because it's got to be changing on a daily basis. I mean, you were talking about AI. Looking into the future, what's really got you excited, would you say?
I'm excited by the speed that we're now progressing, now that the computers are doubling and tripling in speed and capacity so fast. We can start to take AI to the next level and the next level and start doing more and more things than we've ever been able to do, and such as the automatic motion capture, the automatic analysis, the automatic determination of injury parameters, performance parameters. And I think that allows us to respect the athlete more. You know, they're putting their life online, so we've got to make sure that our technology is up to par and can really help them improve and remain safe.
So the wear and tear...
About safety, being safe.
Safety, to that point, the wear and tear on a body, do you get to the point now, because of technology and because of this type of work, that perhaps athletes perform at a high level longer?
I think so. I think it's a catch-22, however. Now that we're getting better and better at improving performance, we're getting closer and closer to that line, that injury line. It's like walking a tightrope. On one side of the tightrope, you've got performance, and on the other side of the tightrope, you've got injury. And you've got to stay on that razor edge. And that's what technology allows us to do. It allows us, have you recovered properly? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating? Nutrition is huge. And so that's why we put a team of professionals around each athlete to ensure that we've got knowledge of all of the aspects that makes them safe and competent in their competitions and in their training.
Phil, can't thank you enough. This has been great. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.